There's a tragic struggle that exists among police officers today. Twice as many cops commit suicide as are killed in the line of duty.
Police officers most of the time will die from their own gun versus, being shot by, someone else.
Possible burglary in progress, 141.
Police officers can't walk around for their entire life seeing what they've seen over a multitude of years and not speak to someone about it.
Copy, shots fired, 2315.
The statistics are staggering. The stories are devastating.
He was nervous about letting anyone here know what he was going through. And, even though I was his friend, I was still part of this. And I think he was afraid to let it out as to what he was going through, what he was feeling.
Good evening, everyone. I am Richard French, and thank you for joining us for a special edition of RFL. Over the next 16 minutes, we're going to be taking you behind the badge for an in-depth look at a tragedy that's growing within the law enforcement community coast to coast here. Police officers taking their own lives because of all the stigma attached to suicide. This is a topic that most people certainly don't talk about openly. And in the police business, where cops traditionally close ranks when something happens to one of their own, topics like job stress, depression, and suicide, well, these are issues still very much in the shadows. But tonight, many brave men and women in uniform, they have come forward to help us not only shine a spotlight on this troubling trend, but also to help us examine some of the things that are being done to combat it. Now, during this program, you will learn some of the disturbing numbers that paint a very grim picture of the problem. You will hear a sergeant tell the story of his partner who took his own life. This is the first time that he has spoken publicly since his close friend's death. We will have a discussion with a spokesperson for the Nassau County Police Department, the former police commissioner of Suffolk County, and a police department chaplain who has offered solace and counsel to many of the force who have dealt with the depression, loss, and even thoughts of suicide. We will give you a synopsis of what happens on a typical night of a police patrol, and finally, we will tell you about some of the programs available right now to law enforcement to help them and their families cope with the stresses that come with the job. All right, so let's now get to the issue at hand. In 2011, the Badge of Life Police Mental Health Program reported that 147 law enforcement professionals in the United States took their own lives. The number of suicides has sadly grown steadily year after year. Now, our reporter, Carolyn Fortino, she's been focusing on this topic for several months, and she joins us now. And Carolyn, tell us what you've learned about police suicides and also about some of the reasons behind them.
Thanks, Rich. A growing number of men and women who are called to serve and protect reach a breaking point where they can no longer stand to live. Police officers are committing suicide in this country in record numbers. It can be blamed on the intense stress they face on the job each day and bring home with them each night. It's a situation that police departments are aware of, but normally won't speak of publicly. In fact, the names of many officers who die by their own hand are never revealed.
There is a brutal truth that exists in law enforcement across the country. Police officers are more likely to take their own lives than to be killed in the line of duty. Every day, men and women in uniform put their own lives at risk so that the rest of us can live without fear. It's a dangerous and grueling profession that only a select group is willing to embrace. Police officers are trained to respond to the worst kinds of situations, from gruesome murders and explosive domestic violence to senseless traffic accidents. But despite all of their training, the reality is they are still human, and sometimes the pressure gets the best of the men and women in blue.
The reason why cops have a lot of these stresses is every cop walks around with a big S on their chest. Everyone thinks they're a Superman or a Superwoman. When they go to a call and the call doesn't resolve to 100% perfection, a baby in cardiac arrest that you can't bring back to life, you feel like you failed. And when you fail, you take that in, and it's another piece of the building block that makes the house cave in.
Police officers committing suicide is a serious problem, but the subject is so controversial that few police departments are willing to talk about it publicly. The statistics paint a very grim picture. The National Study of Police Suicides began investigating the issue in 2008. It found that the rate of suicide for police officers is 17 for every 100,000 compared to 11 for every 100,000 members of the general public. Sadly, as officers age and have more years on the force, risk of suicide increases. Cops with more than 10 years experience have taken their own lives far more frequently than new recruits who are just beginning their career in police work. The study also found that more than half of police suicides come as a surprise to those who are closest to the cops, including their co-workers, friends, and even their family members. Sergeant Harold Redden is a therapist who counsels Nassau County cops seeking help for depression and suicide. He says job-related stress can build up quickly.
I don't know how you really prepare anyone for seeing some of the things that we see. You just can't. You kind of can talk about it. I guess we look at TV and think that's reality at times when it's not. When you go to these calls, and I've gone to calls like that, it affects you. You sit there and you think about it. You go home and you think about it. It will bother you.
Perhaps more than any other occupation, law enforcement is an emotionally and physically demanding job. Long hours, rotating shifts, and exposure to some of life's greatest tragedies can take a heavy toll on police officers. Experts say a cop's ability to cope will ultimately become strained if underlying personal issues are not addressed. According to one study, police officer suicide has been steadily increasing nationwide over the last few years. But the nationwide problem hits even closer to home. 4 NYPD officers have already died by their own hand since the beginning of this year. 2 of them were Long Island residents. On January 15, 2012, 23-year-old Patrick Werner ended his life with a self-inflicted gunshot wound at his family's home in Yorktown Heights. On January 19, 2012, 28-year-old Terrence Dean shot himself to death while on duty. On February 5, 2012, Brian Saar shot himself at his Suffolk County home after having an argument with his wife. And on February 18, 2012, 39-year-old Matthew Schindler pulled over on the side of the Long Island Expressway. He killed himself with a single gunshot to his chin. The Nassau County Police Department does not publicize the names of officers who take their own lives, but the department has lost 5 cops to suicide over the last 5 years. On October 21, 2006, a male police officer shot himself to death. On June 6, 2009, another male cop hanged himself. On April 22, 2010, a 50-year-old male police officer ended his life by drowning. On October 6, 2010, a 16-year veteran shot himself to death. And on March 26, 2012, a 25-year veteran of the force hung himself at Mill Pond Park in Belmore. Law enforcement suicide is a devastating problem that shatters hundreds of families nationwide each year. Sergeant Redden says it is very difficult, if not impossible, for anyone to understand why a cop chooses to end his or her own life. But the first part of the solution is dealing with the issue head on and ensuring that police departments have support programs in place to help officers who are depressed or having serious thoughts of suicide.
There are answers and that you can get better. Even me, I've gone to therapy at times, because I believe in it. It's not something where it's saying I'm damaged. It's just saying that, I need to understand myself better. It's like being, going to a teacher or a physical trainer, things like that. And that no matter what they're going through, they can get to a better place. It's only temporary.
The main point here is that the police department is aware that the difficult situations these men and women deal with every day can chip away at their emotional stability. The message the force wants to get out to its members is that there is no shame in asking for help and that support is available. Rich?
Carol, when you put this together, as you told me, this is obviously not just a problem for Nassau County. We happen to be focusing on this county for this program, but this is a nationwide problem. It seems that police departments have at least acknowledged this reality, and a lot of them are doing what we're about to see, what Nassau County is doing in this case, to try and combat it. But Are there policies across the board here that police and their departments have in place if somebody's got a problem?
Well, police departments across the country have all types of peer support programs that are in place to help these cops cope with the stresses that come from being on the job and just with life in general. In fact, if you do come forward and admit that you need help or you're seeking assistance, there's a certain amount of mandatory counseling that's actually required you undertake by the police department.